When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite, obey your thirst.
Kristi, let's just start right at the beginning, I guess. Do you remember the moment Encircled went from being an idea to your first prototype?
Yeah, I remember it super well. It's actually started in my condo across the street from where I live now. And it was a night before packing for a yoga retreat, my first yoga retreat ever. So this was like 14 years ago, probably ish. So yoga retreats were not like as popular, I would say, as they are now.
Right.
And I was joining one super last minute. I was a consultant full time and I'd gotten the time off and they had a space and I was packing my suitcase and just jamming in everything because at the time I was not a very savvy packer for vacations, at least. And my suitcase broke, the zipper split in half, and it was like 3 or 4 in the morning. It was pretty late, like before the flight. So like there was nobody I could call for a new suitcase. I was going to have to use a carry-on. So I started just like pulling stuff out, just like questioning like, what was I bringing? Why was I bringing it? And I had this like multifunctional scarf. It was like a circle scarf. And I was like, oh, I could make this into a dress. I could make this into a top. Then I don't need to bring so much stuff. And I was looking at it and I was trying to like play with it. And you had to like tie it into all these configurations. And it looked awful. And it did not work as any of the things because the fabric was basically see-through. It wasn't even hemmed. So it was like fraying at the edges. I tried to tie it as a dress. It looked like I was doing some weird kind of like toga / potato sack. I was like, this is so stupid, but it could be so much better. So that really sparked the idea for my first product, the Chrysalis Cardi, which we still have today in our collection, which is effectively an 8-in-1 garment where you can wear it as a cardigan, a scarf, a dress, a tunic, top, a skirt even. And it's really beautiful, sustainable fabric. It's all, there's a system of snaps around it so that it snaps together so you don't have to tie it or pin it or anything like that. So it really actually looks like what you want it to be when you're wearing it, not like you're tying like a scarf into a dress or something like that. So that actually sparked my first product. And that was going to be the whole business actually from the beginning. And then I was like, hey, let's just try this out. So I started to make a prototype and everything kind of rolled out from there.
Well, I think it's kind of funny, actually, because last night I was scrolling through Instagram and I came across a friend of mine and she was wearing one of your sweaters. In fact, her whole wardrobe was pretty much encircled. She was out in PEI. She was sharing what she'd worn for, you had commented. And I thought, it was one of these small world moments. I thought, this is so great. And she had one of your sweaters on and your pants. And so it was so great to see it, that because people do want just ease, especially when they're traveling. But you also sort of moved away from just travelers first. So how did Encircled evolve into do more with less?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say it was probably like we launched the business in 2012. And then I ended up quitting my full-time job around 2014. And then the business started to grow quite a bit. I would say around 2017, I started to feel like maybe there was more of an opportunity to like what we were finding was that customers were buying our stuff for travel, but wearing it for life. Like they weren't like using it just as travel clothing. They were wearing it all the time. And so I felt like we were kind of missing out on a whole market by, rightly or wrongly, I know they say always start niche, by focusing a little bit more on this idea of a minimalist closet or capsule wardrobe, which was starting to become a little bit more popular at that time. People were starting to reject the idea of fast fashion and starting to think quality over quantity. And really like our basics, like even a basic t-shirt that we designed for travel, you can wear it anywhere. So that's where we really started to kind of shift our messaging, although we still develop, I think, with travel functionality in mind. So like lots of pockets, zipper pockets, this, that, comfort, style, breathability, packability. It's not the number one dynamic. And I think one of the other challenges with travel clothing specifically, like if you're targeting like a super ultra light traveler, like they want really light fabrics, and our fabrics are not light because the lightest fabrics in the world are actually synthetic for the most part. unless you're dealing with silk, which is not a good thing to travel with. And we didn't want to go that direction. Like all of our fabrics are sustainable. So we didn't want to get into like any sort of like nylon, polyester, or anything like that, even if it's recycled. So it kind of limited us in terms of our product development too, because people who are those ultralight travelers, they don't want to have that extra weight in their suitcase. And like, truthfully, like our pants are not light. Like our Josie sweatpants are lighter weight, but they're not light. They're like pretty substantial fabric. So if I was traveling, yes, they're versatile. Yes, you can wear them a bunch of ways, but they're not really designed for that like outdoorsy kind of traveler that we were starting to attract a little bit. So that really helped us shift our messaging over that way. And we saw a lot of success with talking a lot about like how you can kind of curate a more minimalist wardrobe and focus on fewer pieces that can do more in your closet.
So alongside of all of this, you know, you're acting sustainably, you're making sure that you're really embracing this minimalist capsule wardrobe. But you're also now dealing with this crazy environment of being made in Canada. And that's primarily why I invited you on, because I follow you on social media. I've been following your posts. You're very vocal about what is happening. And I think that's great. And I think people really need to understand what is happening on the ground for small businesses in Canada right now. So for those of us who are not living day to day in this small business nightmare like you are, can you put in plain language what Yarn Forward is and why it makes tariffs such a headache for Canadian apparel?
Yes. So this is something I learned recently because, you know, we benefited from something called the de minimis in the US, which is basically a duty-free exemption up to $800 US entering the US from Canada. And that was available to a lot of countries. So a lot of people shipped under that. Nobody really had to worry about customs, whether it qualified or didn't qualify was never an issue. And then once that was abolished, August 29th, and we got that notice, I think about 30 days out, you know, a lot of us were like, I wonder what will happen. Like in my mind, because in previous NAFTA, which came before the US Canada Mexico Act, which is in place right now, apparel was duty free, you know, back and forth between Canada and the US. There wasn't really an issue. So I had assumed, we're fine. And then maybe about like 10 days into August, I was like, you know what? I should probably double check my information. So I started to like pick through the act, and then I start to see, there's a special section for apparel. That's never a good thing because that means there's special provisions. And I'm not a lawyer, but I've read a lot of documents in my life, and I was starting to read it and I'm like, okay. So like the HS codes, which are essentially the codes that you categorize your clothing as when you move it across the border. Those are not included. So I was starting to like really understand that they have a special provision for apparel. So being made in Canada doesn't automatically qualify you for a couple of different categories of products, apparel being one of them specifically. I think there's some larger ones like dairy and sugar and stuff like that. But basically Yarn Forward means that the yarn that you're using to knit the fabric needs to be spun in a CUSMA country. So it needs to be spun in Canada, Mexico, or the US. And that is really challenging for like a number of reasons. And at a high level, we knit about 60% of our fabric in Toronto, but we're using imported yarns. And it's already very rare to knit in Toronto. Like I would say less than 1% of clothing brands do that. So to do that with US yarns is very expensive. Not to mention the fact that 40% of our collection, we can't even use like pre-knitted fabric because we can't afford to knit in such a large batch, because when you are custom knitting, you're taking thousands of meters of fabric, which, you know, for a t-shirt like this takes about a meter of fabric. You're taking 1,000 t-shirts in like one color. Like that's a lot of inventory for a product-based business to hold. So that is the stipulation, and it's very hard to comply with, I would say. I'd say there are some brands who do it, but I would say the vast majority are doing a lot of cut and sew in Canada. So they're either importing the fabric or using imported yarns and knitting here. And then it changes the duty regulations because it means that now we're subject to this 35% emergency tariff plus the base duties, which for us range from 6 to 32%, with the majority of our clothing sitting 28 to 32%. So you can imagine that's like a 63%-ish tax on top of what we were supposed to pay going across the border. So going from 0 to 63% just creates such a big logistical challenge for businesses in Canada who want and have US customers. Like we're not a new business. We've been around for like 13 years. We have a substantial US
Right.
customer base that's just not easy to replace like overnight. So I think that's been like the biggest challenge there. And this yarn forward rule is very specific to apparel and it's hard to overcome. It's not a short-term thing to like turn around all your knitting and change everything because people planned everything like 6 or 12 months out. So yeah, so that's where we are right now.
So with these tariffs then layered on top of already high costs, what does this shift actually mean for Encircled survival and for the broader Canadian fashion ecosystem? I mean, you must be talking amongst yourselves with other
Mhm.
small businesses as well, are you?
Yes. Yeah. I talk to a lot of apparel brands. I actually have a group chat with two founders of Canadian apparel brands. We talk almost every day, just sharing challenges because it's such a difficult industry. It's so hard to make clothing in Canada already because of logistically just like how it's set up and the costs, obviously, of doing that. But there's so many benefits to it too, which is why a lot of us do it. We want to be passionate about saving the apparel industry. We want to support our makers, pay living wages, all these good things, high quality clothing. But yeah, we can't absorb tariffs like that. Like it's just too much. We would go bankrupt basically. So most people I know have shut off shipping to the US. And for some people, that doesn't make that big of a difference because some people maybe it was like 2% of their business. But for us, where it was like, 35 to 50% of our business, depending on the month, that's huge. And there's a bunch of other brands in that same predicament where we're just trying to figure out like how can we even ship a package? Like as an example, we had a package stuck at UPS that crossed the border after the de minimis, and it was supposed to go before. And this was like a $792 US package. And so the bill went to the customer because we hadn't prepaid the duties because it was pre de minimis, but now you have to prepay them. And the bill was $331 US when she got the package. And
Oh.
we ended up paying it for her. But, that order, we're not going to make any money on whatsoever.
Right.
And that's just not sustainable. Like, how can anybody pay that kind of tax on products? Like, it's not tenable for most businesses. So I would say majority of us shut off shipping right now just to deal with it and see what, how they can make it work. And then a lot of us are having to explore, long term, we want to explore other markets, of course, but that's not something you can do in the short term. And Q3 and Q4, which we're in and coming up into, are the most important quarters for apparel brands to be profitable. So it's like incredibly important that we have that market access. So right now we're exploring US warehousing, so moving a portion of our inventory to the US in like a third party warehouse to still be able to ship. There's obviously costs to that. There's logistical implications to that, but it is literally the only thing we can do to still be able to ship to the US customer base at this time. So we're going to try it out. I don't know how it's going to work. It might be even too expensive, even at that, because you can import at the cost versus the retail. And then you can get some exemptions for apparel on the base duties, but you still have to pay that 35%. So we'll see. But it's definitely complex. And it's not something like I really wanted to do this year, to be clear. Like I don't really want to expand the business logistically into new markets,
Right.
especially markets I don't consider to be maybe the most stable at this time. So, and that are not reachable that easily by us. So it's a little bit nerve-wracking, I think, but there's only so much you can take as a business, and you have to kind of think of your suppliers and your employees and make the decision that's going to be best for everybody involved.
Yeah, you just answered my next question was about shared warehousing, if that was something you had explored. And then as you were speaking, I was thinking, yeah, but you're going into such a volatile environment as well, where you don't know from one day to the next. I mean, as we've seen, you could just throw out a random statement and upend the world economy. So to operate in that environment, it must be challenging. So does this put you now in a position where you're trying to really appeal to the Canadian market and get the Canadian market to understand what's at stake here?
Yeah, we've definitely started to relook at our Canadian market and see, all of our ads are going to Canadian consumers right now. We're starting to look at wholesale, which is something we haven't done in years, like probably a decade. And looking at other opportunities to maybe pop-ups and, markets in Canada. Those are definitely opportunities. The challenge that I see and transparently, I don't know how many people will tell you this, but like the US market is just so necessary for e-commerce brands. Like there's not very many e-commerce brands that I know that are above a certain revenue level that don't have a majority market position in the US. Canada just really limits itself because of the size and how disparate and how spread out we are. So it becomes that like really tough choice. You're right. There is a huge risk to putting your inventory in another country where things could change and maybe we can't get that back one day. Maybe it's just there and it's, or maybe I have to set up like all these things that are just, I think, very overwhelming for a small business that's, not super well funded and stuff like that. Like it's really hard to navigate. And you are dealing with a lot of small businesses, the people like the larger brands like Canada Goose, they've been working through this for like years. So they have the teams to like figure this out. It's not really going to impact them as much as it's going to impact these like smaller makers under 10 million, who are just like kind of trying to do their best, make good clothing, and service their customers. So I do think it is a risky proposition, but that's business. It's never certain. And I think that's the challenge with entrepreneurship is you kind of want that certainty, but it's just never there. I don't know if that's your experience, but if you crave that, entrepreneurship is not for you, for sure.
It's not an easy lifestyle as somebody who's been, employed, pretty much self-employed for the last 20 years. I completely understand that. But it's not just the American government that's giving you a lot of challenges right now. I saw that you were openly speaking about Shopify. Can you talk a little bit about how that is impacting your business right now?
Yeah. So we there's something called DDP, which is duties delivered prepaid. And you probably hear that term a lot in the news. And basically it means that, myself as the seller, I'm prepaying the duties up front so that when that package crosses the border, my customer doesn't have to pay anything. And in the ideal scenario, you're charging that back to your customer at checkout. So if you're an online retailer, the person gets to checkout. People may have seen this when they're shopping brands that are south of the border. There'll be like taxes, duties, shipping cost, and it kind of all gets added in there. So Shopify does have an app, which, I tested extensively to try and see if we could use that to do that just in the interim, just to keep something happening with the US. And it totally doesn't work, of course. Like it's charging the wrong duty rates, and dramatically wrong. It only works off of 6-digit codes. The US uses 10-digit codes, and the variance in duty rates within those codes can be like 6 to 41%. So it's like charging the lowest percentage, and then it won't even charge the 35%. Extra fun Canadian tariff. So it's like when I go to checkout, the customer's paying like $16 when it should be like $85. So then the brand would have to eat that cost. So that's just not an efficient way to do it. There are other apps out there that you can pay for. They're quite expensive. They range $300 to $400 a month. And some of them have like minimum terms. And the thing is like, we just don't know, like you said, we just don't know what's going to happen. So I don't really want to sign up for a year of something if I'm not really sure and invest like $4,000 in it if I don't know if what's going to happen in October. There's a lot of uncertainty there, so it's really hard to make a decision. But ultimately, we just decided that that was not a good solution for us. And it's a little disappointing because I think it's a big opportunity for Shopify to step up and provide something native to their platform for a lot of their merchants who sell to the US. Like this is probably a big pain point for most of their merchants, even within the ecosystem of those who may qualify for CUSMA compliance, but have to pay that 35% or some other fee. So I don't know what's happening there. I don't know why this isn't being like prioritized, but definitely I think a missed opportunity.
But that's a struggle for small businesses too, though, is that so many rely on Shopify. What's your alternative?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have one?
Yeah, no.
Right.
There are other platforms. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
there
a real
are
struggle.
other e-coms. Yeah. But it's like once your data is on there, it's like you're on there, right? So and I've seen Shopify shut down stores before just at a whim for certain things. And it's like that is also a risk too. So there's always like risks around the corner with these things. We've been on them a long time. I've always been a big fan of their platform, but I think in the last couple of years, the merchant focus, merchant forwardness has been a little bit lacking. If I could talk to them directly, I would have them employ a couple of ex-merchants so they understand the ecosystem that we face and kind of like those day-to-day things. It's great to have AI product descriptions, but that's not really what we need right now.
Right.
We need
Yeah.
like shipping and logistics apps. Like, there's just there's such a different perspective, I think, when you're a merchant versus like a software developer.
So do you think the Canadian government is acting swiftly enough to protect small businesses? Because we see a lot of big moves, on ports and defense. But what about for the little guy? Are you seeing enough?
No. I know there were some announcements earlier. I think it was earlier this week. So I'm not clear exactly on the details of those programs because it hasn't come out yet. But in my experience, no, because there's not a lot of funding for us anyways in our apparel sector. Nobody's talked about the fact, rarely in the news have I heard anything about this, because there's really only a few sectors that are really hard hit by this, like lumber, I think is one of them as well. So I've heard a lot about like the big guys, but the little ones, I think, tend to get swept under the rug. But there are kind of these industries where they're employing Canadians. There's a huge portion of Canadians employed by small businesses under, with employees under 10. So I think it's important to consider their needs as well. I haven't heard anything other than like potentially maybe some loans or something. But again, that's not really fixing the problem, or employment training programs, again, doesn't really help the problem. Like you really need cash grants, tax credits, stuff like that, that's going to reduce your burden so that you can develop in other markets. Those types of grants, they have an export grant, I think, in Canada as well. It's closed right now. But, stuff like that is really critical because smaller businesses don't have those funds to put up, for trade lawyers in Australia and trademarking and all this stuff. There's a lot more than just like turning on shipping to a new market that has to go into it. So I think more funds towards that would be beneficial. And then more kind of support from the government around buying Canadian made, not just for the government, because I know they talked about like having government programs to support, Canadian made RFPs, which I think is a great start. But, encouraging the consumer to buy Canadian and also regulating that, because there's been a huge issue I've seen since February with brands in Canada, claiming they're made in Canada or Canadian born or whatever they're saying. And it's very confusing for the consumer to like decide what is actually Canadian versus not.
And you touched on something about, loans potentially being available. But I know personally, I'm still carrying my COVID loan, and small businesses likely are too. And so to add in, I mean, you're just now borrowing money to stay afloat, to stay alive. And so you're never really getting out of that hole. So a loan, you're right, there needs to be grants and other actions taken that people are not getting deeper into debt to stay afloat.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. You're ready to move your business forward, but first, you need to find the right team. Start your search with Indeed-sponsored jobs. It can help you reach qualified candidates fast, ensuring your listing is the first one they see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. See the results for yourself. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
In Walmart's Nouvelle, time was ticking away. Only a few nights left till the big holiday. But last-minute gifters had no need to worry. Walmart Express Delivery got their gifts in a hurry. From Nintendo to Nespresso and Lego Flowers, they could check off their lists in as fast as an hour. All of Nouvelle, East, West, South, and North, could order gifts up until 5 p.m. on December 24th. So this holiday, just do as the Who's do. With gift delivery this fast, they all gasped. From Walmart? Who knew? Subject to availability, terms and fees apply.
Let's talk about sustainability, because this is a big one. So Encircled is certified B Corp. What does this mean for you and how you run your business? And why was it important for you to have that designation?
Yeah, so a certified B Corp is essentially a standard. So it's an audited standard by the B Lab, which is a multinational kind of not-for-profit. So you go through this whole assessment on your whole business model, from governance to customers, environment, regulations, everything. And then they come through and like audit this assessment and stuff like that. So we became a B Corp in 2018, if I'm not wrong. I think I started in 2017. And one of the reasons I started it was because I was starting to see along with this idea of a minimalist wardrobe and all this kind of stuff, a lot of brands coming out of the woodwork and saying that they're ethically made without really backing up what that means or how they kind of do that. And I think one of the biggest ones, I'm not going to name them on this podcast, but they're a pretty big brand right now. And they were known to come out with a lot of talk about radical transparency without kind of saying why they're ethical, but people were taking that as ethics. So it was becoming very confusing for the consumer. So this was a mark that, a brand I admire a lot, Eileen Fisher, had achieved a long time ago. And I just thought of it as the gold standard in the industry, really the only thing out there kind of, because you can have certified fabrics, but there's nothing really to like certify your business in whole. So that's why we originally pursued it. For us, it kind of didn't change a lot, to be honest. Like we learned a lot of best practices from it, which was great. So we were able to implement more things to make our business even better. But I would say from the get-go, it's always been foundational for me in this business to have a high degree of ethics and integrity. We've always been made in Canada. We've always been local. Every year, we're trying to increase our local suppliers across everything from like labels to like ship bags. Like we're always buying Canadian first and ethics first. And we've always had sustainable fabrics as a pillar in our collection. And it's always been something important to us. So it didn't really change that much, but it just kind of gave us some new ideas for how to do things better, like, offsetting our hydro with green power and like more things we could do for employee benefits and all kinds of things like that. B Corp, I think, has been embedded in a little bit of controversy, I would say, in the last couple of years.
With Dr. Bronner left B Corp.
Yes,
they
Dr. Bronner, and then and then I think a couple of companies got certified that I'm not super familiar with them, but one of them was, I think, a faster fashion kind of brand.
Right.
So that was kind of a little disappointing, I think, for us and a lot of the B Corp companies who are involved, because we know how much goes into these assessments, and it kind of undermines the work of other brands, I think, when certain things aren't looked at. But that's the reality of assessments. You can always fudge stuff by, you play with your score. You maybe have a not-for-profit, but like this thing you're lower on. Like there's ways to manipulate any kind of data in any kind of situation, to be honest. So I think it's just really hard to come up with that. But I know that B Corp is actively reviewing their standards right now and reviewing their process and ask for feedback from current B Corps and stuff like that. So they're committed to making it better, which is something I can stand behind as well.
You mentioned fast fashion, which is got to be a huge thing for you because you have to push back against that, and it's everywhere. Right. And so, people will look at something on Shein, for example, that is, get 5 shirts for $20 and then go over to your site and see, 120 and think, well, and you can understand that argument in your head. Right. So how much of your job is not just what you make and manage every day, but how much of your job is education?
It's a lot of my job. It's a lot. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, you follow me on Threads, so know. I talk a lot about it, especially from Encircled's account on Threads, because people just don't know. They don't know. I think clothing is still one of those areas where I think people are very detached from the supply chain. I think, with food, people are much more like, where's my food come from? Like that kind of movement kind of came up in the last 5 to 10 years. And same even with beauty, like what ingredient is in that? But we're talking about something you're wearing on your body every single day. And you're not asking not only like who made it and how they were paid, but what is in that fabric and what is it doing to your skin, your body, your hormones, your system? Is it safe? Like that's where I feel like people have just disassociated a little bit from it. And it's interesting because we usually see a pretty strong inflection point in new moms because they start to question that for their babies. And then they start to ask themselves those questions as well. Or later in life, we see a lot of women in menopause, perimenopause, who are, dealing with hormonal stuff and asking what's in their clothes and what kind of underwear should I wear and all this kind of stuff. And they're getting more into the weeds. But I wish it was more broadly known and that people would think more about that. Because once you start to think about that, that should really make you question how you can get 5 shirts for $20 at Shein, because you start to really understand that, materials go into that and what would be the cost of that materials and how would that material be produced and made from what and certified or not certified? And then who's being paid to make this? Is it good quality? Are they getting good wages? Are they exploited workers? Are they even being paid? Like there's so many questions that come up because if you think about even like a t-shirt like this, you're thinking about a meter of fabric. You're thinking about probably at least like 20, 30 minutes of sewing time. If you're getting a shirt for $5, like back that out and think about how much that person's probably getting paid because even their wage is a factory wage and then what they're getting paid, like it just starts to like really snowball. So I think like some of the documentaries that have come out in the last like 5 to 7 years helped a little bit with education, but there's so much more broad education that needs to happen. So brands like myself and other slow fashion brands in Canada, I think do a really good job talking about this. But again, it's kind of like we're pushing against a tide. It's no secret that Shein has grown exponentially in the last I guess they've been around since 2017 or something. And now they're $10 billion company. So
yeah, it's crazy.
People are shopping there. There's obviously, and we're actually seeing the retraction in the slow fashion space. Like pretty much every slow fashion brand owner I know is not seeing growth. They're seeing contraction. So that to me is a little bit scary for the industry, I think, as a whole. So I think education is fundamental. But I also think regulation plays a role here that we can't really obviously involve ourselves in, but I think regulation from the government when people are importing some of the stuff. And I think some of the stuff that's being done in the EU and maybe in the US to an extent is trying to do that, but in a way that harms other businesses because the de minimis was being used a lot by brands like Shein. So I think there has to be more broad knowledge of this, but at the end of the day, if the consumers want to shop for that, and there's a lot of price pressure because of inflation and unemployment and everything that's happening, it's really hard to change somebody's mindset and convince them to buy a t-shirt that's $94 when they can get one for $12 from their grocery store. That's a really hard proposition. So we tend to focus on the customers who, really love our stuff, really invest in quality over quantity, really love that uniform dressing. They like to wear these kind of combinations of outfits on repeat and have them never let them down. They're not trendy trend followers or anything like that.
Right.
That's really our niche, I would say, because we can't compete with the brands that churn out 10,000 new styles a day.
So what is a hero fabric you use and why do you use that specific fabric so much?
Yeah, probably our most favorite fabric is our micromodal, which is knit in Toronto. So that goes into products like our dressy sweatpant, our water pant, all of those silhouettes. It's a beautiful fabric. Modal is derived from beech tree pulp. So it's sustainably sourced. It's a natural raw material. It goes through processing and then it's spun into fibers. It uses much less water than cotton to produce, and it's 10 times softer. So it's a very soft fabric, but it has that breathability, longevity, it's very resilient as well without being a synthetic. So that's our favorite. That's my personal micromodal and modal are my favorite for that reason. And that fabric, when people feel it, this is the disadvantage, I think, of being online is people can't feel the fabric through the screen. So when we do pop-ups, literally people will walk by and they touch our because people are not used to seeing and feeling non-synthetic fabrics, because that's just not the experience. You go in a mall store and you feel anything and you're like, ew.
Well, that must be hard though,
experience.
Being e-commerce, and because we are very tactile with what, when we feel something, we think, oh, I want that. But you can't do that when you're shopping online. So how do you handle that hurdle?
It's tough. That is really tough. You do a lot of photography, you do a lot of video, you do a lot of education, but ultimately I know when we were in our previous studio, we had a retail space. This is pre-COVID. And, that retail space did really, really well for us because people would come in, they would tend to buy more, almost double what they would buy online. And they wouldn't return anything practically, and they would spend a couple hours in there shopping with us. And that's the in-store experience that, I think a lot of people, I come from traditional retail. So my background prior to starting Encircled was in retail management consulting, actually. And I started my career at Lucenza way back in the day in retail ops. And people will often talk about how e-commerce is, the it thing or whatever, but there's still a huge portion of sales that happen at retail brick and mortar. stores, a large portion, the majority. We saw that spike in COVID up to e-commerce, but it's come back down and renormalized. So I think that in-store experience is really critical. The challenge with brands like mine that are made in Canada is that our margins are a lot smaller. So it makes it a bit more challenging to do traditional wholesale, especially at larger kind of retailers. But it's something we're trying to figure out how to get back out there again, because it is important to have that experience and for people to really be able to see, fit, try on, and experience that magic of that fabric. Because like when people try on the dressy sweatpants, like they're always like, it's like, they relax, like that feeling against your body of having like really soft fabrics that aren't pinching you, that are comforting you. It's actually like allows your nervous system to kind of calm down a little bit too.
So I feel like, personally, I'm cash strapped, but I'm also very values driven, and it makes me an interesting consumer. And I know a lot of people like me in the same situation. So we want to know, where should we put our money? And so when it comes to fashion, and specifically, let's talk about Encircled, what's the one piece of advice you'd give somebody like me or people listening on building a wardrobe that aligns with the values that we hold very dear, but also like our poor little bank account that's just over here wincing? So what should we put our money into?
Yeah, that's totally a lot of people's reality right now. And we hear that often. Price is often our biggest objection. And it's challenging to overcome because the cost of like making one of our products is probably more than the retail of an average small product. So it's like you can't, the math doesn't math, right? So there's a couple of things. So I think in general, there's a tendency of people to overinvest in special occasion items and underinvest in everyday wear. But when you think about it, those pieces that you're wearing every day, like, why are you spending $400 on a dress you're going to wear once versus a t-shirt you're like, oh, I'll just spend $12 and then I'll throw it out at the end of the year because it no longer looks good because they've washed it and it's all warped and stuff like that. Like, I'd love to see people flip that mindset a little bit and invest in what they're actually wearing so that they can get better quality fabrics, better fit, better make, better construction, because that will help with the longevity. And then you can kind of look at it on a cost per wear basis. So, if you can afford to invest in a couple of really good basics, whether it's with me or some other brand, that's a great starting point. There's other ways to get involved in this slow fashion industry other than just like shopping with a slow fashion brand. I think clothing swaps are a great idea if you can get to one of those in your neighborhood. Those are often kind of fun. Poshmark, like buying resale. We actually have a resale site called Renewed Threads that we host for our own stuff. So people can go on and who own our stuff and sell it to somebody else if they had like a size change or style change or whatever. But Poshmark and those types of resale sites can be a great source for high quality items that, you can get at a really good price. I see our stuff on there all the time. Eileen Fisher, like Jenny Kane, like all these really great brands, and you can get a pretty good price on them. So that can be a good option as well. But above all, I think we just need to get more comfortable with wearing what we own and not feeling like we have to chase trends all the time. We're consuming so much more clothing than we did like 30 years ago. It's just, I think the media plays a role in this for sure, making us feel like we don't have, like when I heard like skinny jeans are out, I think it was like a couple of years ago, and then people are like, let's throw out our skinny jeans. I'm like, because
and they're back, by the way. They're back, by the way.
Yeah, they're back. They're not even back like 2 years later. And like, we all threw
how
those
are they back
out
already?
Yeah. So good thing we donated all of those, so I think it's just like honing more into your style and figuring out your style and just staying true to that. And you can add a few pieces here and there a season, but I think just in general, the whole population needs to chill out. There's too much shopping happening of stuff that people aren't actually even wearing in their closet.
So if somebody wanted to, really analyze their wardrobe and shrink it a little bit, but let's just say 30%, without feeling like they're depriving themselves, what is a 3-piece capsule you'd build for them?
I think, we have on our website, and I'm happy to share this link, we have our Minimalist Wardrobe Workbook, which is actually like a 20-page workbook, which will take you through a process for like basically cleansing and rebuilding your wardrobe to suit your lifestyle. I'm happy to share that with your audience. They can just download it and print it off because I think that's a fundamental starting point. It also is just really understanding your style. So I think everybody's capsule ultimately will be pretty different. But there's definitely a few core pieces, I would say, kind of stand the test of time. Like, you never see that they're out, in my opinion. A really good t-shirt, whether you like a crew neck, a V-neck, or a scoop neck, like a really nice t-shirt that's made out of good fabric that you can dress up or dress down. We've got a line called Going Places Tees, and they're made from like a bamboo spandex. They're stretchy, they're soft, they're very easy to wash, they don't warp. Perfect. Not transparent, because that's a huge problem in t-shirts. A nice blazer. So I think that's really key for dress up, dress down. We make a product called the Unblazer, which is basically, it looks like a blazer, but feels like a sweatshirt. But you can get a really nice tailored or boyfriend or oversized blazer. A lot of places carry them. I think that's a good pillar for dressing up outfits, and can kind of double as a jacket. And then I know people would say denim, and I'm not anti-denim at all, because we're working on a fun little collab with a Canadian brand, Yoga Jeans, right now. But I would say our dressy sweatpants, because I love a comfortable pant. Like, I think you need a go-to pant, whether it's the dressy sweatpant or the Wanderer pant or the Wanderer slimline pant, a really good black pant, because that is like so foundational. Like, no matter what color we bring into the collection and pants, black always outsells like 10 to 1. So I think there's a reason for that, because it's just so core to everybody's wardrobe. So finding that like perfect pant silhouette, whether it's tapered or wide leg, or it's going to be different depending on your body type and your lifestyle, just a good black pant, because that can be just like, again, dressed up, dressed down. And if it's comfortable, that's a plus too.
So I feel like maybe this might show up in this next question a little bit, but going back to your travel routes a little bit, travel is up in Canada. I just shared an article this morning, up 30%. Yay, Canada, staying at home. This is great. But is there an MVP for travel that you would recommend?
Yeah, I think our Chrysalis Cardi is definitely still my go-to, especially if you're going somewhere tropical, like somewhere warm, like if you're going to Mexico or somewhere in the Caribbean or on a cruise. I mean, that garment can transform into like 3 different dresses. So that's a go-to. Our dressy sweatpants are amazing for travel. I mean, that's my airport outfit all the time, is those pants, because you look like a little bit more put together than wearing a sweatpant, but you're still comfortable, because when you're sitting on a plane, especially if you're flying within Canada, like we're not close, you're digging into sometimes a 3, 4, or 5 hour flight within Canada. So I think those are a great versatile dress up, dress down pant. But yeah, I'm really happy that Canadian travel is up. I think it's such an amazing time for Canada and tourism. So yeah, lots of great pieces you can take along the way for sure.
So I mean, entrepreneurship, as we've sort of touched on, is not for the faint of heart. You've been doing this for a long time, and being a values-led business is sort of always challenging. So any advice or biggest lesson that you might be able to share with people who are maybe newer to this industry and what's going on right now?
I think the biggest lesson I learned fairly early on was to surround yourself with community, because I think as solo founders, which many women are, it's important to have people in your corner. And I think when I first started out, I felt like, ooh, I don't want to like network with my competitors. That's weird. They're going to steal my ideas. Like I was very like, weird about that. And now, some of the people who would be perceived as my competitors are like some of my good friends, So I think surrounding yourself and collaborating with others, especially close to your industry, I think is really important, or other business owners in general, just because I think it can be kind of lonely out there. And if you don't have a lot of friends or family who are entrepreneurs, which I did not, it can be very isolating. And I think you can get yourself stuck in your head. And just, maybe by taking 5 seconds to call somebody who's like maybe done this, it'll just like shift your perspective. So I think finding that community is definitely key.
If somebody was to give you a grant tomorrow for like $100,000, what would you invest it into the business? Where would you put that money?
Right now, I would definitely put it into figuring out the logistics and opening a U.S. warehouse for sure. And then into some of our production, so that we could support, some additional inventory and that type of stuff. And then marketing for sure to fund some pop-ups, I think, in Canada as well.
Are you looking at other markets outside of the U.S. right now at all in any way?
Yeah, I mean, we've always had like a bit of a UK and Australia customer base. The EU, we can't ship to either right now, which is whole another issue. They have an act called the GPSR, the General Product Safety Regulations, which again, for apparel, There's very specific regulations. It's meant to detract like fast fashion, and create more circular kind of accountability, but it also creates just a lot of logistics that are really difficult for, again, a small brand to figure out on their own. So we shut off shipping in December 2024 to the EU, which sucks because we had some amazing customers over there. So
Wow.
kind of limits us a little bit, but Australia is a great market for us. It's just really far and shipping's very expensive both for us and the consumer. So it's not like ideal, but I would say they're very values aligned with what we're doing and they love supporting Canadian businesses.
You've talked a lot before about how apparel exporting countries ban or restrict unions. So how does that shape Encircled's decision to keep your manufacturing local?
Yeah. So, I mean, the reality is that probably I think the estimate is like 98% of brands in clothing don't pay living wages. Like I think it's definitely less than 2%. I would guess it's probably closer to 1%. So if you think about that, majority of brands, especially mass fashion mall brands, are not paying living wages in their supply chain. And living wages are usually garnered through like unionization of some kind because they're fighting for rights for workers. So a lot of that is either banned or it's allowed, but there's a lot of discouragement for unionization. There's a lot of violence towards unionization in certain developing countries, which are big apparel markets. Being in Canada, I think, we have a lot of things going for us here. We have a lot of labor regulations. We have we have great healthcare. We have great quality of life, and things that, people will talk about sweatshops being in Canada. I've never seen one personally ever. There's definitely better manufacturers versus like not so good manufacturers, but we're in our factories pretty much weekly. You can't really do that when you're overseas. You could send somebody to check, but then there's so much corruption, like somebody's paid off to say it's okay. Like, when you're actually able to be in those factories and, meet the workers, see the workers, like understand the business model and the owners and everything, it's just so different. And there's a lot more accountability there as well. So all of our factories here have an ethical checklist that we go over when we first work with them and onboard them anyways, because we want to make sure at the end of the day that everything's like above board. But yeah, I would say Canada's a pretty low risk environment for that type of behavior, at least in our industry. There has been problems in the US for sure in certain markets with like I would say undocumented labor in factories before, but there's also lots of amazing manufacturers in the US and in Europe as well. But there's also been some sweatshops in Italy. So like they're everywhere. There could be like good and bad. You can't really just take made in Italy to be like ethical. You have to kind of do some like under the hood investigation, which is really challenging. But I do think generally producing closer to home, in addition to having benefits of, fair wages and stuff like that, you're reducing your carbon footprint because you're not importing garments from like 12,000 kilometers away as well.
Let's do a little bit of a rapid fire question.
Sure.
So I think you've already mentioned modal is your favorite fabric, but is that the one you're obsessed with right now, or is there something else you're looking at?
Right now, I'm a little bit obsessed with merino wool because I think it's an interesting blend. I like to see it blended with other things, but it's a really thermoregulating fabric. And that has a lot of benefits, I think, for especially me in the stage that I am in my life. So yeah, that would be my pick.
What Canadian, or is there one Canadian maker you would love to collaborate with?
Yeah. So, there's so many. I talk a lot I'm very close with the founder of Free Label and Buttercream Clothing, which are both Canadian-made fashion brands. One's in Vancouver, one's in Alberta. And we've collaborated before, but I think it would be really fun to do. We've talked about doing like an in-person pop-up. And I think it would be really fun to do that in the future.
Do you have a closet rule that you live by?
Yes, wear what's comfortable.
Yes, and mine is no ironing. If it says I have to iron it, no way, it doesn't even come home with me. Or dry cleaning. Also doesn't come home with me. It's crazy. Splurge versus save. Where do you tell people to invest and where to thrift?
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit, but definitely invest in good basics. And I would try and thrift trendy things because as we talked about, stuff that was here in the 90s is back again. So you could always find it on Poshmark or something like that.
Yeah, go find your skinny jeans that you're looking for in the thrift store. You could probably find the pair you gave to them.
Yeah, exactly.
So for listeners who want to support Encircled and brands like yours, what's the single most helpful thing they can do besides making a purchase for those who are, who are thinking, I want to, but I just don't have the funds right now? What can they do?
Yeah. I think the best thing you can do is tell people about us. Follow us on Instagram at Encircled _ or on Threads or on Facebook, and tell a friend, share our post, like our post, comment on our post. All those things mean a lot. It's really hard to get visibility. The funniest comment we all laugh about, with my fashion founders group, we're always people will come on to Threads and they'll be like, have you thought about advertising in Canada? And you're like, yes, we've been here for 13 years. You don't know who we are. But that just shows you how small we still are. And I used to work in consumer packaged goods at one point in my career, and they talk a lot about share of voice. And that's a metric they use to measure. It's pretty correlated actually with share of wallet and market share. So you can see their share of voice on TV at the time goes up, their market share tends to go up. So that was really interesting to me. I would say slow fashion brands have a very small share of voice. So anything you can do to amplify our voices is really meaningful to all of us, because it's really hard for us to break through because we just don't have those budgets that, the big brands have to reach consumers. We can't do TV, all that kind of stuff. So anytime somebody can share a post or or comment, that's a beautiful thing.
Where can listeners start if they want to try Encircled for the first time? And what should they know about your size range and shipping?
We ship for free over $225 in Canada. And we have a pretty easy return process. So if something doesn't fit, it's pretty easy to get it back to us. Our sizes range from extra small to extra large in some styles. Majority are extra large. And we are working on extending our pant range actually into hopefully 2X and 3X in the fall. And we do have 3 inseams in our pants. So petite, tall, and regular. So we try to have, yeah.
Sorry, I'm a shorty, and that has been the struggle my whole life, is finding pants in petite size. It's a struggle.
Petite is very popular for us, I would say. It's growing actually a lot. Our talls don't sell as much, but the petite has been a big win for us as well. And we don't just take up the inseam, we deal with the rise as well to make sure the fit is perfect. So yeah, that's something that's been really critical for pants especially. So I would probably, I would start with our best sellers, like our dressy sweat pant. Maybe a good t-shirt is a good starting point. Those are the favorite, or a dressy sweatsuit, which is our dressy sweatshirt and dressy sweat pant. It's just a really comfy outfit that you can split the pieces up and wear in the work too. So lots of good ways to get involved. You can also check out Renewed Threads, which is our Poshmark-esque type site. So you can look at gently loved Encircled stuff and sign up for our emails. We have sample sales sometimes, usually about once a quarter. So you can get a really good steal on things. So those are all opportunities to get involved in the brand.
All right. Amazing. Well, I follow you on social media. So obviously I want other people to be able to. So can you just rhyme off your social media channels, please?
Yeah. So on Instagram, you can find us at Encircled, ENCIRCLED _. You can find me at Kristi Soomer, and the same on Threads as well.
All right. Fantastic. Kristi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Candace. It was so nice to meet you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to share it with someone who'd love it too. And don't forget to hit subscribe to What She Said with me, Candace Sampson, on your favorite podcast app. It's the easiest way to stay connected. Want more? Sign up for my newsletter at whatshesaidtalk.com to get all the latest updates, and let's keep the conversation going on social. You can find What She Said on Facebook and Instagram, and you'll find me on Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Candace Said. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. One of the perks about having 4 kids that you know about is actually getting a direct line to the big man up north. Mm-hmm. And this year, he wants you to know the best gift that you can give someone is the gift of Mint Mobile's unlimited wireless for $15 a month. Now, you don't even need to wrap it. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Hi, I'm Marianne Weisenthal, host of the LifeSpeak podcast, a show where we dive into real conversations about mental health, resilience, and navigating life's everyday challenges. Each episode, I sit down with leading experts in health, work, and wellness to unpack big topics like burnout, parenting, leadership, anxiety, and personal growth. My guests share their own stories of struggle and resilience, and together we keep it honest, relatable, and practical. Whether you're looking for fresh perspectives or just a moment to feel seen and supported, you'll find it on the LifeSpeak podcast.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.